Hello and welcome to the Game Forum. My name is Lindsay. This week I'm going to be doing a review of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. So to start off, my hopes for this game were a bit low after EA's handling of Star Wars Battlefront 2. I really like Star Wars Battlefront 2, at least the combat system in it, but the upgrading system with all the loot boxes was terrible, so I was kind of scared to see how they were going to handle this. But to my surprise, they did really well. So to start off, I'm going to be looking at the graphics. This has definitely got the graphics of a AAA game. The detail in every little section is amazing. In some places, you might just stop just to admire the detail in some of the game. It is really incredible. The variation in level aesthetics is really refreshing. Each place very much feels like a different area. It's not just going to be this is a desert, that's a desert. They are all very unique environments. Moving on to the story, this game is probably one of the best games I've seen for Star Wars in a while as far as tying into previous lore from other movies and TV shows. If you're a big fan of the Clone Wars or any of the other movies, definitely pay attention in this game. You'll see a lot of other crossovers from some characters and a lot of other little hints to the overall lore that I find really cool, especially being a Star Wars fan. The casting for this game is amazing. I really like the main character of Kyle Kestis and his supporting characters. Their acting was really superb. It really helps draw you in to the overall story. And it's a pretty deep story as well. You're not just going to be fighting like just a one-dimensional villain. These are some really good stories for some of the villains, and it really fleshes them out, makes them two-dimensional. Although some of their introductions really make them intense, good villains to fight. Also, adding him in as a character in the middle of the Star Wars universe makes sense. The very first little bit, you will find out that he was a Padawan that managed to escape Order 66 and has been hiding this whole time. When he ends up having to save one of his friends and coworkers, he ends up unveiling that he's had force powers this whole time, and someone ends up turning him in. That's kind of where the story starts. From there, you'll kind of have to find your place in the universe while you start trying to remember all your old skills that you haven't used in so long. You'll start picking up force skills as you progress throughout the world through flashbacks. I found these flashbacks pretty interesting. You find yourself as a young Padawan in the middle of the Jedi Temple under training with your master. This is a kind of interesting way to do training on the fly, and gives a cool tie-in to the Clone Wars as well. Overall, the story in this game really gives the story in some of the movies a run for their money. I think a lot more time and effort was put into this than some of the newer sequel movies, which is much appreciated. I always like it when games really go the extra length to make sure everything ties together and actually makes sense. On top of this game has a really good ending, a very intense ending. Once you get to the final planet, you will be pretty much running non-stop. It makes a new story all of its own while building and expanding upon some of the story elements from previous shows and movies without feeling like it's really overwriting anything. It feels like it fits right into place, which is what it should try and do. So taking a look at its gameplay, it has a couple different elements to it. It's not just going to be, going through and slicing everything with a lightsaber. Its combat system is pretty in-depth and a little reminiscent of Dark Souls. You can slash, but when fighting multiple enemies, it's always best to try and take a tactical approach, because in some cases you can become quite outnumbered. You'll have to get used to when to slash at some enemies, when to deflect some shots back at other ones, also using a block parry system. If you time your attack just right, you can block a strike from someone, push it back on them, and really get a cool cutscene finisher. On top of this, you also have your force powers. You can use these to push, pull, or freeze time, but you only have a limited amount of force meter, so you'll have to try and figure out exactly how you want to time everything. Combine this with a large variety of enemy types, and this can make for some really interesting combat situations, in which you have some shooting at you from a distance, others who are capable of parrying your lightsaber, and others who want to rush right in at you. You won't be fighting the Empire this whole time either. There'll be lots of creatures on each planet to fight too, including some boss creatures for the extra added challenge, along with several other alien races as you go across the game. This really helps add to each planet's uniqueness and diversity. Makes you feel like you're not just killing the same stormtroopers over and over again. You also find occasional encounters with more skilled stormtroopers, ones that are capable of really giving you a little bit of a fight. I really like this. It definitely keeps you on your toes and gives you some good practice for the boss fights. The boss fights are really intense and a lot of fun, although I do feel like they don't scale to the level of the difficulty of the rest of the enemies. Much of the time, I'd feel myself plowing through hordes of enemies to get to a boss fight to get creamed 10 times in a row until I could figure out a way to beat them and continue on. There's also going to be a lot of platforming in this game. It feels very Uncharted like. You'll find yourself sliding down ramps and trying to dodge obstacles fairly frequently. Also, you'll find yourself in a lot of situations where you'll be holding on that last little piece of something that's about to fall and having to climb your way back up. No matter what planet you're on, it's always going to feel a little similar in the platforming element. Sometimes it might be pieces of pipe, other times it could be roots or rocks sticking out from a wall, but you'll get the hang of it pretty soon. One thing I was kind of surprised about in this game is the level of exploration they give you. Pretty much from the get-go, you can choose anywhere to go, so you can progress the story at your own pace. However, a lot of places are going to be locked off to you until you unlock your force powers in the future. So you can't quite explore 100% of the game at any time, but it does let you explore it at your leisure. But one thing I do have to complain about on the flip side is there is going to be a lot of backtracking. Because as you get to another planet and unlock a new force ability, it'll unlock things to where you can go back and find other hidden things you couldn't access before. Normally, I don't really care for a game with this much backtracking, but the game did really make it interesting and unique and gives you a lot of shortcuts so it doesn't take too long. You'll also find a lot of different puzzle elements within the game as well. Some of them are pretty simple and easy to figure out, however, some of them really require you to sit down and think for a second about how the mechanics of the level work. This is really quite enjoyable. They did really well with some of these. Another aspect of the game is you'll find meditation circles scattered across the level. After you get through beating a lot of enemies and clearing the path, if you're low on health and want to progress forward, you can choose to meditate and regain all your force energy and health, but all the enemies you beat before will respawn. Considering the amount of enemies you have to get through and the difficulty of some of the fights, this is definitely worth a pause every once in a while. Sometimes you might just want to go forward with what you have instead of resting to go back to full health. One thing I really like about the game is its map system. It gives you a fully fleshed out 3D virtual rendering of the entire map. It also shows you sections you haven't been to yet, or haven't been able to unlock yet due to you not having the force ability to use yet. This will really save you a lot of time if you're looking for a certain area and can't quite figure out how to get to it, only to look at the map and realize you don't have the ability to get there yet. Or you could find a part of the level you haven't explored yet by looking at the map. Maybe you just overlooked it. It's a good call to go back and check things out. Going around the map and exploring looking for special crates unlocks a lot of customization for your character, your ship, your droid, and your lightsaber most importantly. I thought this was a really cool touch. What you can do is, even though it doesn't really change the damage output on your lightsaber, you can really customize it to make it feel more yours. Changing out some of the hilts, the guard, even some of the metals really helps give it that unique feel to it. This also gives you a lot of incentive to continue to go around the levels and explore more, to find all these chests, to really unlock everything, to really customize the character the way you want. Because there really is a lot to find and unlock in this game. Also, as you progress throughout the game, you get to choose how you want Kyle Kestis to level up. This has a variety of different force abilities. You do this by spending your points leveling up certain force abilities. So if you want extra health right off the bat, you could focus in on that. Or maybe you want a buff in your damage output. Or maybe learn some new abilities to help fight more enemies. It really leaves a lot of it up to you. Overall, I thought the skill tree was pretty good. Lastly, this game is a bit buggy. It's not unplayable, and most of the time you won't notice it. But every once in a while, you will find some times where you'll have some pop-in, some loading issues, or the game might run a little laggy. Although not frequent, it is something I'll mention because I had a couple bugs as I was playing, even after their patches. So overall, the gameplay in this is great. I really like their combat system and use of lots of platforming and puzzles and exploration to find a lot of customization parts. I felt like the boss fights were really fun, although not quite scaled to the rest of the difficulty for the average units. I really like their map loadout, but I feel like this game does have a bit of backtracking. As far as the story goes, it has really good actors and ties into the overall Star Wars lore perfectly. And again, it is a little glitchy, but it's nothing game breaking. It just could have used a little bit more polish. So if you're a Star Wars fan, I would highly recommend playing this game. You pretty much owe it to yourself, as much of a good story this is, and how well executed the gameplay is. If you're not a big Star Wars fan, but a decent fan of some platforming games, I would still highly recommend it. It's just an overall very fun game. The game has a very nice conclusion to it, but I would definitely be up for a sequel for this game. Tell me what you think about this game in the comments below, and until next time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.